Now that we've finished setting up our form, we can edit some of the options. So if we click on this survey button here, you see, or if we hover, we see this little wheel which brings us to the settings. And once inside the settings of the actual form, we can make some changes. So first thing we want to do actually is change the name of this form from the generic survey to something a bit more specific. So the name of this form is actually initial assessment. And save. Some other things we can do here is we can upload an icon. Let's say that we have a special icon for the initial assessment. That icon will show up in your Comcare. So then we have the user properties tab. User properties allow you to store data about the user and use that data in forms, as it says. So for example, like we did with the dynamic text display in the previous video, you could say, do something like, hi, my name is, and then drag the username into the label so that the user's name comes up. And then we have actions. So this tab allows us to copy forms. So maybe we want to copy it to a different module. And then you can also use Xforms, but we'll discuss that in a later module. And then at the at the module level, if we click on Health Facility, the only menu that really shows up is the menu mode. So you can display the menu and then the forms, or just display forms. And this will come more into play as we start using case management. And finally, we have the application level. So let's click on the cog here. So within the application itself, we can add languages, for example. So we can choose to display the forms that we set up, or the application overall, in different languages. And here's some functionality for translations. Again, this will be discussed in a future module. Then multimedia, but we don't have any multimedia references. Then actions, so we can actually copy the application to another project. So if you have another project, for example, I have the Goal Global project, I could copy the entire application, including case management and all of the display logic and validation logic, to my Goal Global account. We can also delete the application on this page. And then finally we have the advanced settings. Now, you might need to click on this little button to be able to show the different advanced settings. So I've turned on data and sharing, build settings, Android settings, and advanced. We tend not to work with Java phones, so I'm leaving those unchecked. And so once you've checked all of these, first of all, this shows up, case sharing and web app. So case sharing is used when you are registering cases, and you obviously need to share those cases within a particular group of enumerators. Again, this will come up in future modules. And then there's this web app functionality. So Comcare has an inbuilt web app in which you can test or enter real data. But obviously we prefer to use BlueStacks because it has a bunch of added advantages over the Comcare native web app, such as, well, for one, it's a lot faster, I find, and second of all, you can use it offline. Okay, and then there's some options regarding the build settings. So Comcare version, I mean, I would never touch this. Practice mobile worker. Right, so you can select a mobile worker to use as a practice user for the application. I mean, if we have the tester account, we actually want that data to be entered because we are going to use it to create our dashboards. Auto update frequency. So it says, how often Comcar Mobile should attempt to check for a new released application version? I would always set this to daily. So, I mean, obviously it's good practice that when you create a new version of an application, you let everybody in the field know that there's a new version and that they should, go to go to the nearest Wi-Fi hotspot, or alternatively use their mobile data to update their application. But if for whatever reason this message doesn't come through, or somebody forgets, at least with this you minimize the chance of the application not being updated on mobile worker phones. The unsend form limit, I would leave this at 5. All it does is it sends a warning message. Multimedia validation. So whether Comcar should validate that all external multimedia is installed before letting the users run the app. That's really up to you, but we usually don't touch this. The auto sync frequency. So syncing. So syncing usually is automatic when you are sending forms. However, when you make certain changes, such as with case sharing, or you update a lookup table, you need that two-way sync. And that's what this basically does. So we're turning on the two-way sync and automating that to sync daily. And then the unsync time limit, again, this just gives you a warning. Then we have the Android settings. So I would always leave this on forms are never removed, unless you're working with very sensitive data, and then maybe you could say, okay, we just want the forms on there for a week. Save forms. So enabling this, I would usually encourage this, because this allows a supervisor, for example, to check what the mobile worker has entered in their phones. So that's a very handy function. Incomplete forms, this is kind of up to you. This means that a enumerator could leave their forms halfway through filling them and then come back to them at a later stage. So I'm just going to enable this for now, just so you can see. But this again depends on the context. Auto resize images. Automatically resizes images within forms. Again, I've never really had much problem with this. Fuzzy search, this is another great functionality, I think. This allows, for example, if you have a case list with beneficiaries and you're trying to find a particular beneficiary, you don't quite spell their name correct, their name will still come up. So that's what this fuzzy search does. Then these are just some home screen and login logos which you can upload. This is another interesting function, auto capture location. So remember we added a GPS point or a GPS question in our form. What this does is it actually captures the GPS location whilst your enumerators are filling out the form. So if you're going to capture the location anyway, it's basically a way to either save time or to verify that if your enumerators are skipping that question, is it really due to them not, their GPS system not working on their phones, or is it because they don't want to show you where they are collecting the form? And again, this is quite context specific, whether or not you want to collect this data, because in some situations, capturing someone's location basically tells you who they are. So if this kind of information falls into the wrong hands, that could have implications for the organization and obviously the beneficiary. Then we have the login duration. Now, this again is context dependent. If you're working in a very security sensitive context, you might want to bring this down to 30 minutes or even 15 minutes. Otherwise 24 hours. This doesn't mean that you'll be signed out and then need Wi-Fi again to log in. This just means that you are signed out and you just need to enter your password again. Log case detail views, whether to log each time a user views details. We usually don't turn this on. And then you have some additional options here. So you can display as a list or a grid. We usually leave it as a list. And then here in advanced, you have a weekly log sending frequency and a daily log sending frequency. Again, it's not something we use a lot. So it's up to you whether or not you would like to use this. And then obviously we need to save our settings. If we want an overview of our application, we can press this button, App Summary. And then we get a nice little overview of all the different questions within the form or the application overall. So you can go form by form, or just look at the application overall. You can select either labels or question IDs. So here we can see, hey, what do our question IDs look like? What is it going to come out as on our export? You can choose to show calculations, yes or no. You can turn on the display logic. So this shows where's your display logic. You can turn on or off validation. And you can download the summary, and that looks something like this. And there you go. Okay, so next step, we're going to create a data export.